Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
Chatawanze.
Happy New Year, Chata.
Happy New Year to you too.
How was it? How's your holidays? How's your celebration?
It was good. It was very good actually. So for the first time in years, I unplugged completely. We traveled for the holiday. I didn't take my laptop. So the only place I took a book. And the only thing the only thing I tried to do was, occasionally I'll pick up my phone to just catch up. But generally it was as phone free as possible. Hanging out with friends. We went to, we had so we visited 4 different friends. Hanging out. So our routine was very simple. One day for each friend. So we wake up in the morning. Me and the family stayed in a hotel. Wake up in the morning, whenever. The hotel was kind enough to extend breakfast time for all the guests. So we wake up whenever, go have a lazy breakfast, go back to our room, basically laze around, and then go to our friend's place for lunch and stay till dinner, just gisting and all of that stuff.
Typical Nigeria. All you had to do was change the environment from the UK to the village, and this is
something of the sorts. Yes, and it was very good. Like I said, I didn't carry my laptop, so it meant that I missed out on quite the number of calls when Trump bombed Nigeria. I mean, when I got back, there were a lot of emails like, "Where are you?" Now, my out of office reply was set. But it also meant that I missed out on a speaking opportunity. Somebody had sent a mail requesting that I come to speak on changing geopolitics. Because of that, and the person got my out of office reply and then went for someone else, which kind of annoys me a bit, but it couldn't be helped. I mean,
look, every now and then, what you want to do is unplug.
Yeah, no, I mean,
because
I'm not
life,
complaining.
yeah,
It's the opportunity cost.
Yeah,
it's the
of course.
opportunity cost. So I'm not complaining.
Well, think of the other side. At least your kids had their dad for one full Christmas holiday uninterrupted. Because there's a bit of schadenfreude on my part that says at least Cheta did not good after you're lazing around and drinking palm wine by the River Niger when you went to Nigeria. I'm like, at least me and Cheta were in this cold together.
What I want to say and show you is not safe for radio. It's not safe
so yes,
I'll keep my especially considering that it snowed this morning, and
my goodness,
it's been really cold throughout today. You just didn't have to remind me of the cold.
But anyway, I mean, talk about the cold. And before we go to, because what we wanted to do in this on this episode was just talk about 2025, our highlights, and if possible, lay down some predictions for 2026. But but in that line, and talk about cold. How cold was Trump's abduction of the Venezuelan president?
Well, you've not seen the BBC style guide or the leaked BBC memo. You're not supposed to use abduction. Please,
we don't work for the BBC.
Let's be politically correct. It's capture.
Okay, let's say nabbing.
No, he captured him. So it was the capture. Let's be good citizens.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because even while that, while we laugh about it now, it's the menacing nature in which language is used to.
But language is not neutral. Language has never been neutral. So I'll give an example. The Al Jazeera journalist Alan Fisher, who is I think is British. He's definitely Western. On Saturday, of course, so we had a family outing on Saturday. My wife is still very unhappy with me because I woke up on Saturday, picked up my phone, and saw that there had been US action in Venezuela. And I just turned around and said, I'm not going anywhere. So I was sat in front of the TV, and it was work. I ended up right. So SBN Intelligence published a report this morning, and I was involved in writing that report about it, an analysis on the geopolitical implications of what the US did in America, in Nigeria, and Venezuela. We're in a new world. It's a new planet. We've essentially returned back to the 19th century. Naked might is right. So Saturday was busy for me, and what I want to highlight is Alan Fisher, the Al Jazeera journalist. When he was reporting from Washington, there was a bit of a Freudian slip. He said the Trump regime, and then he very quickly
Yeah, I
corrected
saw that. Yeah.
himself. He very quickly corrected himself and said, "No, the administration." And I'm like, if you were talking about Moscow, if you were talking about Beijing, if you were talking about Abuja,
Yes.
he would have used regime and moved on. No. So language is not neutral. You know, there are different words to describe the same thing. And the example that I've used on this podcast before, the example that I like to use is the Aba Women's War of 1929, almost 100 years ago. To us, and you are from Aba. So now, for those who don't know, in 1929, women from around the Aba, Opobo, Ikotekpene, that axis of Nigeria, protested against excessive tax by the British colonial authorities. In order to delegitimize it, the British colonial authorities called it the Aba Women's Riot. But for us, it's the Aba Women's War. Now, the ironic thing is that for about the first 50 years of our so-called independence, all our books still called it the Aba Women's Riot.
Yep. I remember
It's
the
only
first
in the
time I
last-
saw it, it was read in a textbook.
Yeah, it's only in the last 15 years or so that there has been a genuine effort to reclaim that history. These women were fighting for our rights. They were fighting an oppressive colonial authority, an extractive authority for our rights. So that's the kind of language is never neutral. So I was not at all surprised when that BBC memo was leaked at all. Basically instructing their staff, do not use the word kidnapped to describe what the US did to Maduro. Saying don't use abducted, use captured or seized. You know,
So is it the BBC being scared that having slammed a potential $10 billion
no,
suit?
it's not. It's
So
not.
it's them just saying, look, we're okay with this, and we're just going to use our language to
Basically,
give it
there's a kind
diplomatic
of
cover.
language that they use when it is a Western country, a Western organization that does something, which is very different from the kind of language if that they would use if it's an organization or a country from another part of the world. And I mean, there are a lot of examples that exist of the BBC using, and a lot of this came to light during the recent war in Gaza. When Palestinians are killed, it is Palestinians died. When Israelis are killed, it is Israelis are murdered or Israelis are killed. You know, those little, they look subtle, but they shift the narrative in a particular direction. And I think it's important to call that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I'm looking for that. There's a word. It's the menacing nature of language and how language legitimizes
Legitimizes.
or delegitimizes, depending on which part you and it's seeing this upfront is quite interesting because remember growing up, if anything, and when we grew up in an era of coups and counter coups. It was never real until the BBC had reported it. So we would not believe what NTA, whichever of the Nigerian Television Authority stations, said something. We'd be like, okay, no, what has BBC said? If it's not on BBC, then we're like, yes, those guys, they tell the truth. It's real. But now you're close to it. You're a bit more nuanced in your thinking, and suddenly you're saying,
You're saying you're seeing it for what it really is. I mean,
yep.
there's an old Soviet joke so it's I think it's maybe mid 70s from the Brezhnev era when they will be talking. So The Russians are not very good at propaganda. They do a lot of propaganda, but they are not very good at it. So their population, and perhaps there's something about Russian culture. So Russian culture tends to be very cynical. So, and again, it's because of their history. So the Russians, when they are listening to government agencies talking, they know it is propaganda. So this joke from this Soviet joke goes, oh, we are propagandized. We know. But you ask your American friends, and the American friends say, no, we are not. What's propaganda? And that is the, I don't remember the way it was told, but it's actually very hilarious. But bottom line is that what they're saying is that population that does not know they're being propagandized is the example of the perfectly propagandized population.
So that means a lot of us Africans were in a good space because we already know that everyone's lying to us anyway.
No, and again, we are so deviating from what we're supposed to be talking about.
I know. But I see this is what we're saying before we started. That look, we're going to start and then just go off on a tangent. No, but when you think about it, Cheta, I mean,
are you saying we're indisciplined?
I'm saying you were making a point, and I want to hear what.
So a lot of Africans, a lot of Africans, and I think it's because we haven't defined our group interest properly. A lot of Africans do not know that we are being, or let me put it like this. A lot of Africans, so for example, a lot of Nigerians will admit that there's a lot of propaganda flowing about in Nigeria, but they will turn around and accuse the other side, in quotes, in our country of being the ones doing the propaganda. I don't know if you get what I mean.
No, I get that. There's that part, but I'm sorry for cutting. But like when there's a government figure, especially when things happen, government says, well, 10 people were caught in this, or we already know at the back of our minds that look, this is 10 times X.
Depending on who is in government. So in most African countries, certainly in Nigeria, the LCM here is ethnic group. So if it's our ethnic king, it's somebody from our ethnic nationality that's in government,
lowest common lowest common denominator, yes, just so that people who are not used to your.
But when it's somebody from the other ethnic group, or increasing the other religion, and they're saying the same thing, we're like, no, you are lying. So there's already that mix within our system that is problematic.
Okay, see, Cheta, just so that let's stay focused. I've been saying this. We do need to stay focused. But yeah, so we wanted to talk, just generally highlight. Don't necessarily have to be good or bad, but what stood out to you in 2025, especially as it relates to African heritage communities?
I think for me, the ultimate thing that when we discussed what we should talk about, I made a list of 10 topics and the 10 things that stood out for me, because I like making lists. And the first prize for me was actually at the end of the year, the visa extension for prison workers, because that thing cuts to the heart of a lot of what we have been saying. The UK would have deported those prison workers without blinking, but suddenly they realized that, oh, if we let these guys go, the prison system will collapse. And it brings us to it's a common thread in everything. It's cynical.
Extremely so.
I see. At the end of the day, it's their country. Inshallah, in a couple of years, it will be our country as well. So there's a right to look at. There's an argument that can be made that, okay, we want to be able to put barriers so that we are not overrun. But when you cynically exploit other countries to fill in gaps, and then you go out of your way to make those people who you brought in cynically unwelcome, and then still turn around with the same face without changing your facial expression to say, oh, come back, because we need you. It's actually a very, very unhappy cycle. Case in point, COVID. Now, the UK actually has guidelines. I don't know if it's a full law, but the UK has guidelines that says that they can't go and recruit doctors from certain countries that have shortages of medical personnel. Nigeria and Ghana are on those are on that list.
That list, yeah.
However, during COVID, for example, planes landed in Lagos. I know at least 3 doctors who moved that way. Basically, they shunted the system to bring them into the UK in order to take care of British citizens. And then those people have ended up paying loads of money. And it's the same thing with the care sector. Loads of money in order to remain in the UK. So the question becomes, why so cynical?
No. So
it's going to be ironic, me, geopolitical analyst, asking that question, so I will not ask it.
No, but the thing is,
because at the end of the day, it is interests.
It is interest.
Yeah, and one thing that a lot of African countries have yet to learn is that there are no friends. One. Number two, I would give a modern interpretation of the Thucydides trap, which essentially, and with this is what the whole world is learning very brutally with Uncle Trump. If you are not at the table, you are on the menu.
And what you said about the interest, I remember that was probably the first lesson that my lecturer drilled into us, because I studied history and international relations in Abia State University, and he started off with, right off the bat, there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests.
Yes.
And I know I don't remember a lot from school, but that I do remember, because it made a lot of things so clear. Because being someone who had always been interested in politics, I always just kept asking myself, you guys were fighting each other just yesterday. Suddenly you're, what the hell is going on? But then, when you go right back to the cynical nature of that extension, when I heard about it and read about it, I was upset. Not because I didn't wish those who had, as you said, they've spent money to be here, they've poured in a lot of their sweat and all. They came here on a promise, and having moved here, there now, suddenly halfway through the game, the umpire is trying to change the goal. So that for me was like, oh, finally there's some extension. But I was upset because this said to them, look, it was the clearest statement yet of, we don't give a damn about you. We are going to look at things from how they influence us or how they affect us. And if we're going to give you just a year, again, when we say, oh, it's been extended for just a year. So it's almost like, we're going to toy with you. You're like the dead mouse at the end of a cat's paw. We're just going to keep tossing you back and forth until we get bored with you. And then, but I was saying to someone else that until people have been trained here, people who are here have been trained in those skills to fill in those gaps. That's one. But two, not just fill in the gaps, but also have a population that is willing to work and work in those professions. Sadly, we're still going to be tossed back and forth. And even on the question of people being willing, there was a report just at the tail end of next year, of 16-year-olds or the young population saying to themselves, "Oh, look, they believe they're going to be the first generation to retire early as a result of issues like not just physical health but mental health." So you already have a generation, a population that is determined not to, in quote, go the full hog, which means you're still going to need these people that you're tossing back and forth to fill in spaces that people have already determined that, look, we're not going to work in those sectors. And even when we do, we're not going to be there for long. It's cynical. But anyway, we didn't come to rant, we came to reflect. I think for me, what stood out very like a sore thumb was that Island of Strangers statement in Keir Starmer's speech, which I've never been able to shake off.
But you've heard it before. Enoch Powell made that speech in 68.
And that is the thing. That was Enoch Powell. That was someone who was seen as a radical right-leaning outlier. So even within the Conservative Party, people are like, whoa, dude, this is a bit far. So to not just hear it in modern times, I think it wasn't the problem. For me, the problem wasn't that it was said in modern times, because it was going to be said anyway. It was already being said in different ways and at different times by different people, but it was who said it. And it was the party from which that platform, or the party on whose platform he stands. And I remember, for the
reasons which they could not comprehend,
for the
pursuance of a decision by default on which they were never consulted, and themselves made strangers in their own country.
You've dug up the no, but I think when you started
it once upon a time.
You're an interesting fellow, Jetta. Yeah, so yeah, it was just a thing of it hitting you, and then you suddenly realizing that the nature of real politic is such that it doesn't matter where you find yourself, you're always going to be fair or unfair game in one way or the other for the ambition of staying in power.
Yeah, again, once you are not at the table, you're on the menu. See, I think this is something that a lot of our people may not necessarily like to hear, but a significant part of the reason why this happens is because our countries are weak. I am never going to forget when I first lived in the UK, and I was going, and I had made a decision to move back to Nigeria, which was in the light of the financial crisis. Now, I had a Chinese colleague, Chong Ti, and he also decided to move back to China. He was given a sent forth. I was not. There was no racism to it. It was just they couldn't believe that I was going back to Africa. Now, consider the context. This was shortly after the 2008 Olympics. China had just done, because the 2008 Olympics, I think many people acknowledge, was China's coming out party. That was when China put up a show that many people in the Western realized that China was actually a country that was doing well for the first time. For the first time, they recognized that and were willing to acknowledge it. So, at least in theory, there was something for Chong Di to go back to. But for me, it was like, no, he's not going. Where is he going to? So
he's going to change his mind at the last minute.
Exactly. So and the irony of the whole thing is, I'll never forget my masters back then. There were 8 of us Nigerians in my class, and there were 3 of us who were absolutely certain that they were never going to go back to Nigeria. The other 5 of us all knew that at some point we would finish, maybe work a little in the UK and then go back home. Guess where the 5 are now? That's essentially 20 years wasted. So when you have those kind of realities, and at the end of the day, countries such as the UK have embassies in Nigeria, so they know the reality of Nigeria. I mean, let's not pretend about it. The vast majority of people who left Nigeria specifically, I'm talking of Nigeria specifically, but this can apply to Ghana. This applies to a lot of countries in our region, with the exception perhaps of Sudan, with the exception perhaps of the DRC, with the exception perhaps of Chad. But the vast majority of people who leave our own region, and I'm not talking of the Middle East, are economic migrants. They know. And they know that most human beings, I think, one stat that always shocks me whenever I see it is that of all the people in the world, it's only about 4% of all people that are migrants. The vast majority of human beings will prefer to stay at home. So when people in middle age choose to up sticks, you will know that it has
It's a problem.
they are literally drowning. For people to do it, especially when they do it en masse, it would have been a different conversation if it was, say, one or two of us that's up sticks. But the numbers are there. There was a point where it was 62,000 Nigerians that I think that was in 2021 or 2022. 62,000 Nigerians were given UK visas.
In fact, the thing is, almost if you think back to everyone you've known in the past 10 years, and it's quite interesting because I did that some time ago, and at least 30%, okay, so maybe not everyone, let me say everyone you've worked with in the past 10 years, at least 30% of them have left Nigeria. Because it's shocking because the anomaly is no longer that people have traveled. The anomaly is, oh, you're still in Nigeria. And I don't know how, how this is for, because again, when I'll take taking Derby for instance, when we moved to or settled in Derby, I always joke that in that first few months, you could walk down the city center and you're one of maybe five at most Black people that you see at the time. But then 6 months later, as a Nigerian, I could stand in the middle of city center and shout, "How far?" And you just be hearing
And people will say, I
idea,
did.
idea. But it
And
puts
and that is the jarring thing. If it's possible to be sympathetic to Nigel Farage and his menagerie, that is the jarring thing that's
you,
they
you
see.
know the thing is what he's good at is taking a truth and then adding some bit of or a whole lot of mischief behind it. I was having a chat with someone the other day and I said, let's not um kid ourselves here. If you go to Nigeria and given how there's a lot of ethnic tension in our different communities, and you see suddenly come out and you see a lot of what we will call locadas, bikes everywhere. You're going to wake up and go like, well, hang on, where have all these people come from? What's going on here?
Yep.
Extrapolate that to this situation. And suddenly you realize that, okay, on one hand, are they right to wonder what's going on? Yes. But then on the other hand, it's a transaction that has been made, which is where the counterbalance comes. We did not sneak in here. You said this is the visa, these are the visa types, this is how much you're going to have to pay for it. This is how much you're going to have to pay to use the NHS. This is how much you're going to pay to continue staying here. So my problem then with people like Farage is having known that people were invited to a large degree here to come work in certain sectors or school or to prop up the universities, you can't then turn around and say, oh, hang on, where did they all come from? It was a transaction.
And he was he was responsible for a
And
lot
he
of
was
it.
responsible for it, for a whole lot of it. But see, Chesa, let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll just carry on and then, but also look forward to the new year. What do
No
you
wahala.
think? Welcome back to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha. All right, Chata, in the first half of this episode, we spoke about Daddy Trump. We spoke about a few of the things that stood out to us.
I think I should because I tend to call him Uncle Trump or Uncle
No,
Donald.
he's
But
Daddy Trump now,
yes,
man.
we should take a cue from from Mark Rutte of the Netherlands and call him Daddy.
Call him Daddy.
Yeah.
He also looks like some UK politicians might soon be calling him Zaddy. But so is there before we go to things to look forward to, I also just wanted to point out one thing that stood out for me, and that was and although it seems to be winning now, but let's see what 2026 brings. But that was the election of Zach Polanski as the leader of the Green Party, because suddenly what he did was, um, one, by becoming a sole leader, because the Green Party has always had a tradition of having co-leaders, but by becoming a sole leader, around whom much of Green's talking points can revolve, he projected himself as that populist, even though he calls it eco-populism, but a populist figure on the left. But what he has also done is suddenly to seize a lot of people's imaginations. Now, the Green Party membership has shot up. I know a few people who have, sadly, I would say, dumped the
Labour
Labour
Party,
Party
actually.
for
Why is that
Green.
sad?
Hey, look, man, they're leaving me here, and it's not
You're scared
nice.
of losing the party whip. The Labour
No, no,
Party is
no,
not
it's
recognizable as to what it originally was. Don't
no,
forget that
yeah, but
so you have a Labour Party, a party that calls itself Labour, that is anti-union.
mm,
So
how is it anti-union?
they are looking for ways to break strikes, for example.
Well, no. So what I
That
would say, I think
will
any
push.
government, any government, to be fair, when faced with the issue of, on one hand, making sure that front-facing services are kept running, but on the other hand, also faced with labor unions saying, "Look, we want to extract as much as we can," will be in a tough position of trying to find what that balance is. So I think that's what could he have been handled better, perhaps. But the thing is, I wouldn't quite say that they're anti-union. I mean, there's just one union that has, well, Angela Rayner was kicked out of Unison, wasn't she, because of her stance on the Birmingham.
Exactly.
But
It sounds so cute. Because I was just looking at you like Birmingham was just playing in my head.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, yes, no, but I won't say. But I think it's a bit of a stretch to say the Labour Party, as it were, even now, is anti-union. I would say they're not managing. One would think that as a party that has been formed by the union, they'll manage their relationship better. They're not doing so. But anti-union, not quite.
let's go. You sounded so cute trying to dance on this
No, no,
spinning
no,
top.
no, no, no. I no. To be fair, I can't say they're anti-union. I've just said that there's a lot of mismanagement in how the relationship is being handled. But anti-union is a long stretch. But
Bottom line
mm.
bottom line, and I'm sure even you cannot dance this away, is that the current Labour Party does not look anything like the Labour Party that was started in the 1930s.
Oh no,
Um,
1930s is a long way. Sorry to cut you. I mean, you're going too far. When you talk to people, and I've certainly felt that way, who were quite excited, about.
Jeremy Corbyn,
No, no, no. I'm even saying in 20, when I became a councillor, for instance, people who were quite excited, or even in 24, the general elections, a lot of people who wanted to just get rid of the Tories because of just how they mishandled the country, suddenly are asking themselves, "Hang on, what the hell is going on?" And that is not because, again, and I'll always go back to the biggest issue that this Labour government has is that of perception management. Because whilst there are things that have worked that they've done, look at the upgrade to workers' rights and all that, those are very Labour things. However, it's the road to delivery that has been shaky. So when people look at the or the failed uh, opportunities to clearly communicate, or sometimes the abrupt nature in which some policies were just dropped without, again, carrying people along, they're asking, what the hell are you guys doing? And that clouds any judgment of, okay, you know what, let's see the delivery. Let's look at the workers' right, the renters' right, the giving 16-year-olds the right to vote, things like that. NHS and
why should
waiting
16-year-olds
lists.
have the right to vote?
So that's on the book. So 16 years will have the right to
Yeah,
vote.
that's something that I'm opposed to.
Mm.
16-year-olds, 16-year-olds
Because you're a
don't.
Grinch. You're Daddy Grinch.
No, I'm not. I mean, if
It happens in Scotland.
the fact that it happened in Scotland, does it mean it should happen in England?
No, I'm saying the board hasn't burned down,
If 16-year-olds anyway, I'm not yet in a position where I can make such policy, but 16-year-olds should have the right to vote. They should also work to parents. It's just that simple. Yes, they should work and they should pay tax. I'm very so one of the problems and this is a position that almost got me kicked out of CSO groupings in Nigeria.
A civil service organization.
If you don't
No, this is
pay
not civil service.
tax, if you don't contribute, you should not vote. End of story. In short, my initial position was a bit more extreme. If you're not educated up to a certain level, you should not vote. Because at the end of the day, and we're seeing the problems with democracy now coming to the fore in America, here, in Europe. See, democracy, unfortunately, is a popularity contest.
Sadly.
And most times you see it is the most talking SOB that gets voted in. And then comes in and does a lot of damage.
You've been looking at my notes.
Well, it's interesting that you, who is supposed to be of the left, is also agreeing with this position of the right. See, basically.
Oh no! I'm talking about the popularity contest.
Yeah, basically, in short, let's go straight and follow Gordon's law. Hitler was elected to power. People always forget that. So that tells you that democracy in itself has issues. What they call it? Elections. The way elections are run.
But was Babangida elected to? Okay, no. So carry on.
Yeah. So I mean.
Yeah. No. Well. No. So I the thing is, and what scares me, to be honest, about the 16-year-olds voting isn't the widening of the electoral opportunities that I'm in favor of, but in the immediate term. So I think what's
really opposed.
No. What scares me in the immediate term is that when you look at the pollings and the figures, a lot of young people, especially 16-year-old boys, are seeing people like Andrew Tate and Nigel Farage, and I'm thinking, bloody hell. But again, when you think about it, what were we doing at 16? We were little anarchists.
It's a very different context. 16, I was running away from GSS guys, because remember, I grew up on a university campus. My father and other lecturers were activists against people like Abacha. Abacha was in charge when I was 16. Routinely, the DSS, that's the secret police for those of you who don't know, used to come into campus to pick people up. So we were already politically aware at 16. But crucially, we were not working.
No, so that's interesting. But anyway, so there's that. And so what started this whole thing was Polanski, because I was saying what he has done and what I see looking forward is not just a fracturing of the vote on the left, but he's going to be, I suspect, the new darling for a lot of people in our communities, because he's been very clear on his stance on immigration.
So I think what is going to happen in terms of the big politics is that a lot of people from our community, that's from the African community in the UK, will gravitate towards either Polanski or Davy. These are two people who have been very, very clear that the UK, they've looked at it, they've come up with what I dare say Kestama, Shemai Mahmood, David Lammy and the rest have come up with, but are too cowardly to say, which is the UK needs its experts. It's unavoidable, but because for political reasons, the three who are currently in power will keep waffling about the issue.
And then extending visas by 1 year.
Exactly. I mean, so let's go back to that whole prison thing. David Lame's office requested the visa extensions, but under what condition are they going to get? I don't even remember the number of the number of the number of
Or
visas that
officers?
they
Oh,
give,
okay.
of
Mhm.
officers that they give. I don't remember the exact number, but you have to ask: is there any situation where they are going to suddenly have that number of British officers within the next 1 year? And the answer is no. This is something I'm quite willing to bet my house on. They will not find that number of British guys within the next 1 year to take
Even
on
these people
the
that want to protect our, as they say, protect our kids.
yeah. And so is essentially they're going to keep patching it up until the next election.
No, but you know
Just
what's
see,
even
one
more
thing that will guarantee respect. So I think that one of the reasons why Keir Starmer and his people are doing so badly in the polls is the fact that people have seen through them, and that people have seen through the fact that they're not truthful. It will be easier for them. See, one thing I will give British people, that I still choose to believe, is that the British people are rational. If you have a political class that are willing to stand, and no matter how unfortunate it is, tell them the truth. This is the situation. This is what we need to do. They may grumble. I mean, grumbling is a British national pastime, but they will take it. They will keep calm and carry on. The problem is you keep lying to them.
I think it's not even so much about lying to the people as it is trying to adapt to what the other party is saying. I think that's a bigger problem because
Same WhatsApp group.
yeah, no, but I think is the motive is what, even for me, it's more troubling. So if you're lying to someone, at least you know that, okay, I want to do this and I am going to tell you I'm not, and then I'll do it. Trump, are you going to invade Venezuela? No. And then poof, he's in there. However, if you are trying to do one over reform, or trying to checkmate Farage in what he says or what he does, and that informs policy, rightly or wrongly, and in most times, in every case anyway, wrongly, what that means is that once Farage has found out this weakness, all he's going to do is just keep pushing and pushing, because he knows they are going to just keep adjusting. And then the question would then be, why not just have the full fat racism rather than
Well, what I
skimmed
can tell you,
milk
and I
reform?
have said this so many times, Farage has peaked. He has reached it, and the polls are beginning to catch up with that. Farage has peaked, so I'm not afraid. See, like I'll repeat what I have said so many times on this podcast. Farage only gets into Downing Street, into 10 Downing Street, if Starmer loses his nerve and calls a general election anytime before 2028.
No, I don't think somebody is going to do that.
Yeah, so so that is the conditionality. If Starmer loses his nerve and calls a general election anytime before 2028, Farage gets into Downing Street.
In other words, police
But
Sunak.
but if he holds his nerve by Q3 2027, it will become very clear to everyone and their dog that the talents that Farage and his party have is to stand in the corner and be throwing stones. You don't want them in the glass house.
I mean, over the weekend, they sort of like showed that willingness to say anything at any time. So on Venezuela,
The Trump.
yeah, on Venezuela, Farage says, which again, I personally I do believe that the UK should be, and Kesama should be coming out to say, look, this is wrong. Although Farage skirted around it, I'm not sure he's right and whatever, in that his ChatGPT statement that he posted on Twitter. But in a time, at a time when people thought, oh, the Farage will say, oh, I stand with Trump, suddenly he's trying to sound like the
He's
statesman.
trying to sound prime ministerial.
You understand? And maybe again, this goes back to to him, what you've said about him picking, and maybe he's looked at the poll and said, "Oh my goodness, people, I should start behaving myself." But then the other thing was Richard Tice talking with Trevor Phillips about SEND, and that's a special education needs, talking about the provision, talking about, more or less saying without saying, or implying without saying, that what he would like to do is nationalize those provisions rather than have private suppliers, if you may, give out or handle those contracts, which is very, very different from what they would have said 2-3 weeks ago or 1 month ago. So you see, now it looks like they're also trying to fit different,
to sound mature,
to sound mature.
to appeal to the neutrals. It won't work.
No, because ultimately people are going to just keep calling them
in
out.
the councils that they have, and they are going to get more councils in May, those councils will be poorly run, and they will break every promise that they've made.
Oh, in Derbyshire, it's quite interesting. In Derbyshire County Council here, where the leader of reform is also a councillor in Derby City Council.
So your friend?
Ew. He 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 railed against Derby City Council increasing council tax to the highest level allowed, because, oh my goodness, this should not happen. You're putting the people under too much pressure. Goes to county council, becomes the leader of the council, and guess what? Not just for 1 year, for multiple years, they are putting council tax up to the highest. So you and they're also, um is it them or which other council that are going to spend £5 million to for on God, what are they called?
They should come and dash me the 5 million.
Or on people to basically come into the council and see whether they can save 19 to 20 something million. So guaranteed, sorry, 500,000, sorry, not 5 million. So guaranteed someone is going to get this money to just come in and check if you can save. Reform is going to show by the councils, and I agree with you, they are going to win councils in May, but then they're going to go in there and make a mess of everything. This should be interesting to watch.
It will be very interesting.
And then why I said you copied my paper, one thing I had on my bingo card in the future is the Americanization of UK politics.
That has been happening since Margaret Thatcher. So
but now we're going to start looking so more at the person rather than the party, because what you see is people trying to build mini empires out of the parties that they represent, so that you can see, well, this is me, candidate this or this MP or that MP, not so much part of the larger
body. Where I will
body.
differ with you is there will be attempts at that, but just because of the very nature, American politics it's a lot more winner takes all. More powers have been concentrated in the presidency over time. So when one thing a lot of people don't know is when America started, the more power was concentrated in Congress. It was closer to a parliamentary system as we have in the UK than it was to what we recognize today as American presidential system. And the president was sort of like the anagram of the king, as it were. It's just that over time, the executive has seized more and more power, and now in America you have you have a Congress that is very willing to lie down and be tickled by Daddy Trump. So
to the Congress, he's definitely zaddy.
Yeah, but in the UK, it's still quite different. And Keir Starmer, because he's a rather lackluster individual, he's not that charismatic. He has actually helped unwittingly to give Parliament more power. There was a move towards more Americanization under Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson was charismatic. But the guys after him there's always going to be that swing song in the UK, again, because of the very nature. If more power goes back to the king somehow, then we'll have this conversation.
Oh,
But yes, there will be attempts to Americanize, but they will fall flat.
okay. Well, let's see. I'm sure we'll talk about it in at the end of 2026. And yeah, I was right in the first figure, 5 million. Hampshire County Council is going to spend 5 million on consultants to see if they can save 19.3 million or up to between 19.3 to 38 point whatever million,
I am a
which is just
consultant. Can I
madness.
send you my CV?
I'm not a reform councillor in Hampshire County Council.
But you're in Derbyshire Council now.
No, I'm in Derby City Council. What I will say is follow the money, because
I don't understand. See, this is.
there are different
We'll take this
councils.
conversation offline.
No, but there are different councils. But anyway, last thing, I think that we're going to have a rise of tech bros and tech sissies from our community, because as the community grows, people are going to look at what services and solutions they can offer, especially those that rally around our cultural nuances. And I've seen a lot of people start to talk about this. People want to start offering mortgage solutions or banking solutions. We're going to see people try to use the thrift contribution method and make it more tech savvy. So I think my prediction for this year is we're going to see at least one, maybe two, and I don't even know where they're going to come from, but businesses out of the African heritage communities that serves uh, along the parts of our cultural nuances. I don't know what you think, Cheta.
I mean, I don't have too much to say about the tech bros. I think I will want to. Okay, let me give a message to the tech bros because they sit on some capital. I think the key events that I will be looking at is one that is in February, actually, which is the end of the consultation regarding the changes to migration rules. So basically the public consultation is ongoing on the proposed shifts to a 10-year settlement routes. I think it is important for the African diaspora to lobby now.
Yep.
And this is where the tech bros, they sit on capital. So this is where they come in useful. If this law passes as it's written, the 5-year route to British citizenship effectively dies. So for those who could do ILR, this is the time to apply. If you are close to it, apply before any rule changes. I do not think that it will be retroactively applied. So I think that those of us who got here earlier will be safe. That's my thinking. There's a subsistent Supreme Court ruling on this matter. You don't do retroactive, but nevertheless it is something that I think we need to lobby about. It shouldn't be allowed to fly.
And you know what I'll say next? Write to your MPs, guys. Write to your MPs,
Exactly.
because that is how you lobby in the UK. Put pressure on the MPs. The MPs will put pressure on the ministers, and the ministers will rethink. It's just happened with the changes to the inheritance tax for farmers, where Congress, or just on the last day of shutting down quietly. Did I say Congress just now? Parliament,
Yes, you
rather.
said
Sorry, Parliament. See,
you in your head
Daddy Trump.
you've Americanized the UK politics.
Look, man, it's Daddy Trump. You see that the Parliament softened a bit on some of those policies that we're going to put forward. So we do need to continue to write to our MPs. Cheta, I know we want to go we want to go and see what Nigeria does
Daddy
on the
Eagles.
pitch. From Daddy Trump to Daddy Eagles. But thanks for making our time for this, Cheta.
Thank you, and
Happy New
Happy New
Year.
Year again.
Yeah, and Happy New Year to all our listeners, to everyone who's supported us and kept this podcast going. Here's looking for forward to more interesting conversations in the new year. See you at the
Amen to
next one.
that.
Amen to that.
All right. Auf Wiedersehen.
Mm.